In the quiet whispers of prophecy, one name rises from the shadows of history, reverberating through the echoes of time: Persia. Today, this ancient land is known as Iran, a nation whose actions and ambitions stir the world, and whose role in the final chapters of human history is not only undeniable, but pivotal. What if I told you that Iran is destined to play a central role in the ultimate confrontation between good and evil? A role so profound that it could reshape the Middle East and possibly the entire world. You might wonder, why should we care about a country so far removed from our daily lives? The truth is, Iran's influence stretches far beyond its borders, and the Bible speaks of a time when Persia, now Iran, will rise as a key player in the ultimate showdown of nations. As we watch the current events unfold, it's crucial to ask, are we witnessing the unfolding of these very prophecies? In this video, we will delve deep into the ancient scriptures that have foretold this moment. Together, we will explore the connections between Iran and the mighty events of the apocalypse, revealing the surprising truths hidden within the pages of Ezekiel and other prophetic writings. Do not be deceived by the world's distractions. The signs are all around us. In the rising tensions between Iran and Israel, in the forging of alliances with Russia and Turkey, we see the ancient puzzle pieces falling into place. But what does this mean for the future? And more importantly, what does it mean for you? Join me on this journey as we unravel the mysteries of the end times. Together we'll discover how Iran, Persia, is not just a political entity. It is a divine key, unlocking the final days and guiding us toward the truth of God's eternal plan. Prepare yourself, for the truth you're about to uncover will change everything you thought you knew. In the vast tapestry of biblical prophecy, one of the most significant, yet often overlooked, roles is that of Persia, what we now know as Iran. If we are to understand the role Iran plays in the events leading to the end of times, we must first recognize the weight of its place in Scripture. Iran is not just a nation. It is the key to unlocking understanding of the prophecies foretold by the ancient prophets. And as we delve deeper, we begin to see that Iran's importance in the final days is not merely political, it is prophetic. You see, in the Bible, Persia plays a crucial role in God's divine plan. If you look closely, you'll realize that Persia is not just another nation mentioned in passing. No, Persia is one of the cornerstones of prophecy. Its place in the final days has been carefully woven into the fabric of God's word. From the time of the great Persian Empire, when Cyrus the Great decreed the return of the Jewish exiles to Jerusalem, Persia's influence has been deeply tied to Israel's destiny. Cyrus, in many ways, was an instrument of God's will, a Persian king who served as a means of restoring God's people to their homeland. In the book of Isaiah, God calls Cyrus his anointed one, Isaiah 45:1, a title usually reserved for Israel's kings, indicating just how special a role Persia was to play in the unfolding of his plan. But how does that relate to Iran today? The connection is not just historical, it is prophetic. Just as Cyrus was used by God to bring about his purposes, Iran is now playing a significant role in the events that will lead to the ultimate confrontation between good and evil. You might ask, how could a nation with such a controversial reputation be part of God's plan? But remember, God's purposes often transcend human understanding. He uses the unexpected, the seemingly unworthy, to accomplish his will. Look at Pharaoh in Egypt, Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, and even Cyrus. Each one played a pivotal role in God's redemptive story. Take a moment to reflect on what is happening in the world today. Iran's involvement in the Middle East, particularly its antagonism with Israel, is not by chance. There are many who fail to see the connection, dismissing it as mere political posturing. But when we examine the prophecies in Ezekiel 38 to 39, where Persia is foretold to lead a coalition of nations against Israel in the last days, the parallels become impossible to ignore. Iran's ongoing support for groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, its backing of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, and its growing alliance with Russia and Turkey, all of these are not isolated incidents, but fulfillments of a divine prophecy that was set in motion thousands of years ago. When we turn to Ezekiel 38, we see a vivid description of this final battle, Gog and Magog. In this prophecy, Persia, or Iran, is depicted as one of the key players in a massive invasion of Israel. But here's the fascinating part. Despite the great power that will come against Israel, the outcome is already determined. God will intervene. Israel will not fall, and the glory of God will shine through the darkness of these times, revealing his ultimate sovereignty over all nations, including Persia. God's intervention will not only bring peace to Israel, but it will also reveal his greatness to the world, showing that no matter how dire the situation may appear, his plan cannot be thwarted. Now think back to the events of history. Iran, or Persia, has been a key player in shaping the world we live in today. But it's not just about the past, it's about the future. In these final days, when the world seems to be spiraling into chaos, Iran's actions are signaling the fulfillment of prophecy. For those who are paying attention, these events are a sign that we are nearing the end times, and yet many are unaware of the significance of these actions. They see the headlines, they hear the news, but they fail to make the connection between these current events and the ancient prophecies found in the Bible. But it's not just about recognizing the role of Iran. It's about understanding the message behind the prophecy. In Ezekiel's vision, Persia's rise is not just a warning of destruction. It is a reminder of God's ultimate control. No matter how powerful the nations of this world may seem, they are all within the grasp of his sovereign hand. The prophecies about Persia are not merely a call to fear, but a call to faith. When we understand that Iran's role in these last days is part of God's plan, it shifts our perspective. It helps us see that no matter how the world may seem to be falling apart, God is still in control, and herein lies the lesson we must carry with us. History is not just a collection of random events. It is the unfolding of a divine narrative, one that God has set in motion from the very beginning. Persia's role in that narrative, from Cyrus the Great to modern-day Iran, is not a coincidence. It is part of a divine plan that has been set in motion for thousands of years. Every nation, every event, every moment in history is a part of that plan, and Iran's place in the end times is a powerful reminder of that truth. As we watch the world around us, we must remember that God is not a passive observer in the affairs of men. He is actively involved in shaping the course of history. And as we witness the rise of Iran, we must be reminded of the prophecy that foretells its role in the final days. But even more importantly, we must remember that God will not allow the forces of evil to prevail. When the time comes, he will intervene, he will protect his people, and he will demonstrate his power to the entire world. The lesson we learn from Iran's place in prophecy is not just about the future. It's about how we live today. The world may seem uncertain, but we can take comfort in knowing that God's plan is unfolding exactly as he intended. And when we see the signs of the times, when we see nations aligning, when we see tensions rising, we are called to keep our eyes on him. For in the end, it is not the power of nations that will determine the outcome of history, but the power of God. So, as we continue to watch these events unfold, let us not be afraid. Let us not be anxious. Let us take heart in the knowledge that God is in control. Just as Persia played a pivotal role in the past, so too will it play a role in the future. But ultimately, it is God's will that will prevail, and his glory will be revealed for all to see. And that, my friends, is the most powerful truth of all. Let us carry this truth with us as we move forward. understanding that every nation, every event, every person has a place in God's grand story. And as Iran's role in the end times unfolds, let us remember that God is always at work, and his plan is unfolding perfectly. When we look back at the history of Persia, now Iran, we begin to see a pattern, a divine thread that runs through time, guiding the events of the world in ways we cannot always understand. From the rise of Cyrus the Great to the actions of modern Iran, there is a story woven into the fabric of Scripture that cannot be ignored. As we explore this story, we begin to realize that the events of Persia's history are not just historical facts. They are signs, messages from the past that point us to the future. Let's start with the moment when Babylon fell to Persia, a moment that echoes throughout the pages of the Bible. In Daniel 5, we read of the fall of Babylon, a great empire that had oppressed God's people for so long. The writing on the wall foretold the end of Belshazzar's reign, and in that very night, Babylon was overthrown by the Persian Empire. This moment wasn't just a political shift, it was the hand of God at work, fulfilling his promises and setting the stage for the return of the Israelites to their homeland. But what is the significance of this moment in our understanding of the end times? It shows us that God uses the rise and fall of empires to fulfill his will. Just as Persia conquered Babylon and played a role in the restoration of Israel, Persia's actions today are part of a larger divine narrative that will lead to the final days. The Bible shows us time and again that no nation is outside of God's reach. Whether it is the rise of Babylon, the fall of Rome, or the actions of modern Iran, each moment serves a purpose in God's grand plan. As we look at the present day, we can see the parallels. Iran, like Persia of old, plays a pivotal role in shaping the Middle East, and by extension, the world. Iran's involvement in Syria, its support for Hezbollah, and its growing influence in Iraq and Yemen. All of these are not just geopolitical moves. They are steps in a larger plan, a plan foretold in the Scriptures. Just as Persia once held power over Israel, Iran's actions today are tied to a prophecy that points to the eventual confrontation between the forces of good and evil. When we consider the prophecy of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38-39, we begin to see the full picture. In these chapters, we are told that in the last days, Persia, Iran, will play a leading role in a coalition of nations that will come against Israel. The alliance of nations in Ezekiel's prophecy includes Gog, Russia, Magog, and others, but Persia, or Iran, is singled out as one of the key players. This is not just a coincidence. It is part of the divine plan that was set in motion thousands of years ago. The story of Persia's rise and fall is not just a story of political power. It is a story of God's sovereignty. In the Bible, God repeatedly demonstrates that he is in control of history, guiding nations and rulers to fulfill his purposes. Even when it seems like the world is spiraling out of control, we can take comfort in knowing that God's plan is unfolding just as it was meant to. Persia, in the time of Daniel, was used to bring about the restoration of Israel, and in the future, Iran will play a role in the events leading to the final victory of God's people. Consider the lessons that we can learn from the history of Persia. One of the most important lessons is that God's purposes are not always immediately clear. Persia's rise to power was not something that people of that time would have predicted. Yet God used Persia to accomplish his plan. The same is true today. While we may not always understand why events are unfolding the way they are, we can trust that God is working behind the scenes. Just as Persia was used to bring about the restoration of Israel, so too will Iran be used to fulfill God's prophetic plan for the end times. This lesson should give us hope, especially in times of uncertainty. When we see the rise of nations like Iran, we can take comfort in knowing that God is still in control. The nations may rage, the people may rebel, but the word of God stands firm. And as we look at the role Iran is playing in the Middle East today, we can be sure that it is no accident. The events unfolding before our eyes are the fulfillment of ancient prophecies, prophecies that remind us that God's plan is always at work, even when we cannot see it. The rise of Iran in the modern world is not just a political event. It is a sign. It is a sign that the final days are drawing near. The alliances that Iran is forming with Russia and Turkey, the support it gives to terrorist organizations that seek to destroy Israel. These are all signs of the fulfillment of the prophecy in Ezekiel. As we watch these events unfold, we must remember that they are not just random occurrences. They are part of a divine narrative, one that points us toward the return of Christ and the ultimate victory of God's kingdom. But the lesson of Persia goes beyond just understanding prophecy. It also teaches us about the character of God. God is faithful to his promises. Just as he used Persia to bring about the restoration of Israel, he will use the nations of the world to bring about his ultimate purpose. The rise of Iran, just like the rise of Persia in ancient times, is part of God's plan to show his glory to the world. And just as Persia played a role in the deliverance of Israel, so too will Iran's actions contribute to the final defeat of the forces of evil. This is where the true power of God's sovereignty shines through. The nations may make their plans, but it is God who directs the course of history. As we look at the world today, it's easy to be overwhelmed by the chaos and uncertainty. But when we remember the story of Persia, we are reminded that God is always at work. No matter what is happening in the world, no matter how powerful the nations may seem, God is in control. And he is working all things for his glory and for the good of his people. In conclusion, the history of Persia is a story of God's faithfulness and sovereignty. Just as Persia played a pivotal role in the restoration of Israel, so too will Iran play a role in the final days. As we watch the events of the world unfold, we can take comfort in knowing that God is at work behind the scenes, fulfilling his promises and guiding the course of history. The rise of Iran is not something to fear. It is a sign that God's plan is unfolding just as he intended. And in the end, it is God who will triumph, and his glory will be revealed to all the nations. In the vast tapestry of prophecy, one of the most dramatic moments foretold is the coming battle of Gog and Magog, a final confrontation where the forces of evil will rise against God's chosen people. As we journey through the ancient texts, it becomes clear that Iran, or Persia, as it was known in biblical times, is destined to play a leading role in this epic struggle. But what does this mean for us today? What can we learn from this prophecy, and how should we respond? The prophecy of Gog and Magog, found in Ezekiel 38-39, is often regarded as one of the most mysterious and powerful depictions of the final battle. In these chapters, God reveals a time when a coalition of nations, including Persia, modern-day Iran, will come together to attack Israel. This alliance, led by Persia, will sweep across the world, threatening Israel's very existence. But in the midst of this overwhelming force, God promises to intervene. He will defeat the attackers in a way that only he can, demonstrating his supreme power and showing that no force, no matter how great, can stand against the Almighty. Let's pause and reflect on the profound implications of this prophecy. Persia, a nation that once played a key role in the deliverance of the Jewish people through the leadership of Cyrus the Great, is now foretold to lead an alliance of nations against Israel in the last days. This is a stunning reversal. How can it be that a nation once used by God to restore Israel will now be a primary adversary in the final days? This is the tension we must grapple with, and yet the answer is clear when we understand the broader scope of God's plan. Throughout history, God has used nations and empires, both good and bad, to fulfill his ultimate purposes. Whether it was Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, or Persia, Each has played a part in the divine story that leads to the final victory of God's kingdom. In the case of Persia, or modern-day Iran, its role in prophecy is not to be seen merely as a political event. It is a divine movement, a part of the unfolding of God's plan for the end times. Today, Iran is actively involved in shaping the Middle East, particularly in its support for groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and its influence in Syria and Iraq. But these are not isolated actions. They are steps toward the fulfillment of Ezekiel's prophecy. The alliances being formed between Iran, Russia, and Turkey, nations mentioned in the Bible as part of the Gog-Magog coalition, are clear indicators that we are nearing the fulfillment of this ancient prophecy. But what does this mean for us today? How should we, as individuals, respond to the events unfolding in the world? The first and most important thing to remember is that God's plan is unfolding exactly as He intends. Even when it seems like the world is descending into chaos, we must trust that God is sovereign over all things. The rise of Iran and its role in the Gog and Magog prophecy is not a reason for fear. It is a sign that God's promises are being fulfilled. We are living in a time when the Bible's prophecies are coming to life before our very eyes. And while this can be unsettling, it should also be a source of hope and encouragement for us. When we look at the events taking place in the Middle East, it's easy to become overwhelmed by the political and military tensions. But when we understand the biblical context, these events take on a much greater significance. Iran's actions are not just part of a geopolitical struggle. They are part of a cosmic battle between good and evil. As Iran continues to assert its influence in the region, we are witnessing the fulfillment of the prophecy that was written thousands of years ago. And while the forces of evil may seem powerful, we can take comfort in knowing that God will ultimately triumph. Consider the story of Israel's deliverance from Egypt. In the midst of their captivity, the Israelites could not see how God would fulfill His promises. But God was at work behind the scenes, orchestrating the events that would lead to their freedom. In the same way, we may not always understand how God is working in the world today, but we can trust that He is. Just as He used Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, and Persia in the past to accomplish His purposes, He is using the nations of today, including Iran, to fulfill His prophetic plan. This brings us to the heart of the lesson. In the face of growing darkness, we must remain steadfast in our faith and trust in God's sovereignty. The prophecy of Gog and Magog is not just about the defeat of Israel's enemies. It is about the ultimate victory of God's kingdom. When the nations of the world gather to attack Israel, it will seem like all hope is lost. But God will intervene in a way that no one expects. He will show His power and His glory, and He will protect His people. This is a powerful reminder that no matter what happens in the world, God is always in control. His plan will come to pass, and no nation or force can thwart His will. As we look at the rise of Iran, we must remember that it is part of God's divine plan. Iran's role in the final days is not something to fear. It is a reminder that we are living in the last days and that God's return is near. And while this prophecy points to a time of great turmoil and destruction, it also points to a time of great hope and victory. For after the battle of Gog and Magog, God's kingdom will be established and His people will be victorious. In the midst of this, we must ask ourselves, how are we preparing for these events? How are we living in light of the truth that the end times are near? The world may seem uncertain, but we can take comfort in knowing that God's plan is unshakable. The prophecy of Gog and Magog reminds us that God is at work and that He will protect His people. As we watch the world unfold, let us hold fast to the promises of God. Let us trust in His sovereignty and know that His victory is sure. In the end, the battle of Gog and Magog is not just a battle between nations, it is a battle between good and evil. And while it may seem like the forces of evil are winning, we know that God will have the final victory. As we face the challenges of this world, Let us keep our eyes on the promises of God. He is faithful to his word, and he will bring about the ultimate victory. And just as Persia played a key role in the past, Iran's actions today are a part of the divine story that will lead to the final victory of God's kingdom. Let this truth be our comfort and our hope as we wait for the day when Christ returns in glory. As we look toward the future, we begin to realize that the signs of the times are all around us. The Bible tells us that in the last days, certain events and alliances will take shape, preparing the stage for the final battle between good and evil. And as we witness these events unfold, we must be aware of the signs God has given us to recognize the nearness of his return. Iran, as Persia in ancient times, is one of the most prominent players in these prophetic signs. If we open our eyes to the current geopolitical landscape, we see a rising alliance between Iran, Russia, and Turkey, nations that are mentioned in Ezekiel's prophecy of the Gog and Magog battle. This alliance is not a coincidence, and it is a sign that we are getting closer to the fulfillment of the prophecies that have been recorded for thousands of years. But how do we know this? What specific signs are we to look for in today's world that tell us the final days are near? The first sign is the increasing military alliance between Iran, Russia, and Turkey. These nations, once seemingly unrelated, are now working together in ways that could shape the future of the Middle East and beyond. Iran has long been a key player in the region, supporting militant groups and exerting influence over countries like Syria and Iraq. But now, with Russia and Turkey forming closer ties with Iran, we see the stage being set for the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38-39. The prophecy speaks of a coalition of nations, including Persia, Iran, coming together to attack Israel. As we see these nations aligning today, we cannot ignore the possibility that this alliance is a precursor to the fulfillment of this prophecy. When we look at the alliances forming today, we must also consider the growing threat to Israel. Iran's support for groups like Hezbollah and Hamas is not new, but its influence has grown in recent years. The increase in proxy wars and terrorist attacks against Israel is a clear sign that tensions are rising. In Ezekiel's prophecy, we are told that in the last days, Israel will be surrounded by enemies, with Persia leading the charge. As we watch the rise of Iran's influence in the region, we are reminded that these events were foretold centuries ago. The question we must ask ourselves is this: are we seeing the fulfillment of this prophecy before our very eyes? But it's not just about the military alliances or the threats to Israel. There is a deeper, more spiritual sign that we must pay attention to: the global chaos and instability that we see today. Across the world, we are witnessing political, economic, and social turmoil on an unprecedented scale. From natural disasters to economic instability, from political unrest to social division, the world is in a state of upheaval. The Bible warns us that in the last days there will be signs of unrest and chaos, and we are witnessing these signs in real time. This global instability is a sign that the world is being prepared for the final events that will lead to the return of Christ. We must also remember the words of Jesus in Matthew 24, where he tells us to watch for the signs of his return. He warns us of wars and rumors of wars, of nations rising against nations, and of the increase of lawlessness. As we look at the world today, we see these signs all around us. The rise of militant groups, the increasing political instability, the growing tensions between nations, these are all signs that the world is heading toward the final conflict, the ultimate battle between good and evil. But what does this mean for us as individuals? How should we respond to these signs? The first thing we must do is remain vigilant. The Bible tells us that we do not know the day or the hour when Christ will return, but we are called to be watchful, to live our lives in a state of readiness. We must not be lulled into complacency by the world's distractions. The signs are here, and we must be awake to the reality of the times we are living in. The second thing we must do is trust in God's sovereignty. As we see the rise of nations like Iran and the growing tension in the Middle East, it's easy to become fearful. But we must remember that God is in control. These signs do not mean that God is absent or powerless. They are proof that He is actively working out His plan. Just as He used Persia in the past to fulfill His promises, He is using Iran and other nations today to bring about His purposes. The rising tensions and alliances are part of God's divine plan, and He is using these events to prepare the world for His return. Finally, we must remain hopeful. The signs of the times may be unsettling, but they also point to a future where God's victory is assured. In the end, it is not the forces of evil that will prevail, but the power of God. The rise of Iran, the growing alliances, the chaos in the world, all of these are signs that the final victory is near. As we look forward to the return of Christ, we can take comfort in knowing that God is faithful to His promises. No matter how dark the world may seem, God will triumph, and His kingdom will come. In the face of all that is happening in the world today, we must not lose heart. Instead, we must hold fast to the hope that is found in Christ. The signs are here, and they remind us that we are living in the last days. But these signs also remind us that God is at work, fulfilling His promises and preparing the world for His ultimate victory. As we watch these events unfold, let us stay focused on the truth that God is sovereign, and His plan is unfolding exactly as He intended. Let us trust in His timing and remain vigilant as we wait for His return. As we come to the close of this journey together, there's something important to reflect on. It's easy to be swept away by the constant noise of the world, the headlines, the distractions, the chaos. But when we take a moment to step back, to pause, we realize that there's a greater story unfolding around us. One that is far beyond our control, but filled with divine purpose. The events of the world, the rise and fall of nations, the tensions between powers. These are not just fleeting moments in history. They are all part of a grand narrative, one written long before we even had the chance to hear it, and one that will continue long after we're gone. It's a narrative where Iran, a nation so often in the headlines, plays a pivotal role in the unfolding of God's plan. As we look at the alliances forming in the world today, the prophecies in the Bible seem to become clearer and clearer. These events, these moments, are not mere happenstance. They are signs, messages from God, that we are closer to the final victory than we realize. Just as Persia had a key role in history, Iran today serves as a reminder that God's plan is still in motion. But this story isn't just about the rise of nations or the events we see unfolding on the world stage. It's about us, right here, right now. It's about how we choose to live in the midst of uncertainty, how we decide to engage with the world when everything feels like it's unraveling. The Bible tells us that we are to be watchful, ready for the return of Christ. It's not just about knowing the signs, it's about how we respond to them. Are we ready? Are we prepared to stand firm in our faith, no matter how dark the days may seem? These prophecies, while often filled with difficult imagery and unsettling events, ultimately point to hope. They remind us that no matter what happens in the world, God's will prevail. Iran's role, the alliances forming, the rise of powers, it all points to the fact that God is in control, even when it feels like everything is spiraling. And that is where our hope lies, not in the stability of the world, but in the certainty of God's promises. If you felt a stirring in your heart through this video, if something deep within you resonates with the truth of these prophecies and the hope that they offer, I want to invite you to be a part of this journey, sharing these videos, engaging in the conversation, and spreading the message. Every little act of support matters. It's not about numbers or recognition. It's about the hearts that are touched, the souls that are reached, and the truth that is shared. If this video has brought even a little bit of light into your life, or helped you find peace in the midst of uncertainty, consider showing a little support. Every bit of encouragement goes a long way in helping me continue to create content that shines a light on God's truth and wisdom. As we walk through these times together, let's keep our hearts and minds focused on the truth that God is at work, that His plan is unfolding exactly as He designed it. And through it all, let's support each other, hold each other up, and remain firm in the faith that God is with us. Let's trust that no matter how the world may shift around us, His promises are unshakable. Together we can be a source of light and hope for those who need it most. I want to thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for being a part of this community. Your presence here means the world to me, and your support makes it possible for me to continue sharing the message of hope and truth. Remember, no matter what the future holds, God is in control, and His victory is already assured. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for joining in this journey of faith and discovery. May we all continue to seek His light and live in the hope of His return.